Welcome to the All In Podcast, the show that explores how the top real estate entrepreneurs have gone all in on their businesses. I'm your host, David Morse, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, and I invite you to come along with us as we explore the stories of the most elite professionals in the game today to learn how they went all in and how you and I can do the same. So I just have to ask, are you all in? I want to welcome everyone back to the All In Podcast, and we are really happy to have Jonathan Dupree with us today. You guys are going to get tons of value, so Jonathan, thanks for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm in the studio, dude.
This is the studio.
Here we are, yeah, three of us all at once. This is great.
Yeah.
Jonathan, start off by telling us a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Sure. So I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My family lives in Austin, and I go back there quite often, and I live in Phoenix since I stepped into this role of regional director for the Southwest region at Keller Williams. Grew up in real estate world. My mother's been an agent for 48 years. My sister...
A little bit of experience.
Yeah, just a little bit. My sister is one of the top agents in Baton Rouge, and they just made the transition to Keller Williams, so I'm excited about that back in Baton Rouge. And but this is all I've ever known. It's kind of been in my blood. I have two boys, a 20-year-old. He's about to be 21. That's so crazy, man. It's 21-year-old. Yeah, I have a 16-year-old, and then I have a two-year-old little girl. So we have a giant gap.
That's a huge gap.
I'm
trying not to copy you.
Everybody always asks me. They try to be really nice and go, is it a new wife? No, same one. We just still like each other. And my oldest son, Noah, he is the director of growth and technology at a market center in Fort Worth. He got his license the same day he graduated high school.
Wow,
and he took all his graduation money and he said, "Hey, Dad, if I pay for my own ticket to Tom Ferry event, will you go with me?" So his senior trip, instead of going off with all his buddies, we went to California and went to I think it was called the Success Summit or something like that, and he paid for it.
I knew I liked this kid.
Yeah, he's such a stud, dude. He reaches out to people. He's the guy reaching out to high-level people and going, "Hey, help me. What should I do in this scenario? How would you handle this?" I mean, he's a sharp kid. And then my 16-year-old runs a YouTube channel, and he's got about 140,000 subscribers. And it's he told me he's a big-time billiard player, and his YouTube channel is a billiard instructional channel. It's one of the most influential billiard channels on YouTube. And it's just incredible. When he was 12, he said, "Dad, I don't think you get it. YouTube's going to be my job." And I said, "I don't get it."
Right.
And since he was 13, he's been filing a tax return.
No kidding.
And makes a better living than a lot of realtors I know. It's crazy.
That is
really
amazing.
Wild.
So maybe we're going to be interviewing him very soon.
He's a sharp.
On
he's
YouTube.
sharp, man. He's a sharp
cool.
kid. He definitely is.
Very cool. So you grew up in real estate. Yeah. Your mom had a company. Yeah. I know a lot of kids that grow up around real estate. They swear they're never going to be.
I was that
estate.
kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more. Why? How did you come around?
I hated as a kid. My mom would go, "Hey, we're going here somewhere fun, something we're going to do," and then we get in the car, and she had this really long Cadillac, right? So I don't know if you remember back in the day, like in the 80s, the Caddy was a cool car, but it was long and it was like a tank, and we'd all be piled in the back, my sister, me, my brother, and then she'd go, "We're making one stop, and y'all don't need to say a thing on this appointment." And we'd be going on a listing appointment with her on our way somewhere fun. I was like, "Oh my God!" Or she had one. I remember the first cell phone that she got. It was like hardwired into the car, right? The first car. They didn't call it cell phone. They called it a car phone.
Right.
When you got a mobile phone, it was a bag phone, like a battery packed in a bag. It was as heavy as my freaking briefcase.
Joe and I have seen these things on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
we've
heard about
you
that.
guys have, Brian, I know. And right up there with CD players, huh? And I just said, I'm never going to do this. This is not. And so I went a totally different path, and I played basketball in college, and I got injured and had surgery on my knee, and I couldn't play anymore. And I had always been intrigued by magic. And my parents went to Vegas and brought me back a Siegfried and Roy magic set, which Roy just passed away. I don't know if you guys...
Yeah, I heard that, unfortunately.
And so I just fell in love with magic as a young child. And I decided to leave college and go to a magic college called the Chavez College of Magic. And
No way.
Yeah, dude. And it's kind of like, the way I tell people, it's kind of like what Juliard is to music is what this college is to magic. So you don't go there and learn how to do magic tricks. You go there and you learn how to routine and how to create a how to walk on stage and how to talk on stage and how to create a actual flow of a show, and
like an experience.
Yeah. And so I left college and went to the Chavez College of Magic, and then I started working as a professional magician in Las Vegas, and worked at Caesar's Palace, and I worked at the Stratosphere, and did that for a couple of years, and then I left and started traveling on the road, doing these corporate events, speaking and incorporating magic in those events. And I did that for a long time. We started having. I was married, and my wife and I started having a family. And when Noah was born, and I still traveled, and he went on the road with us. And then when my other son Jaden was born, it was harder to travel as a family. So I was on the road by myself, and my wife said, "Hey, I feel like I'm a single mother." And she was a realtor. She worked at my mom had her own brokerage, and she worked for my mom. And I said, well, you know what? I said I would never do this, but I'm going to get into real estate so I can stay home. And I got into real estate, got my license, started working with my wife. And I'll never forget, dude, my first week as a realtor, I didn't know I did. My mom did zero training. There was here's your desk, here's your phone, go get them. I'm like, go get what? What do you want me to go get? And in my office, this is probably about the same size as y'all's studio in here, and there were 3 desks. One was mine, one was my sister's, and one was my wife's. And I sat at my desk, and I had 2 chairs across from my desk, and I got a little bonsai tree fountain, and I thought, oh, that'd be soothing and relaxing. And then I'm reading something where fish tanks would relax people, and I told my wife, you know, I need a fish tank behind me, so when my clients are sitting here, they're looking at that, and they feel peaceful, and they're relaxed. And she's like, you need to call somebody. I'd rearrange my desk, and she's like, you need to work.
Doing everything
you're
except
driving
work.
me nuts. I'm going to kick you out of here, right? And so I started calling for sell by owners. My dad came in, and he was like, hey, you need to start calling for sell by owners and clip the ads out of the newspaper, glue them to an index card. We had computers, but my dad's like, this is what you need to do. So that's what I started doing. And he was a real estate developer and a real estate attorney. And everyone, they said, when you get in real estate, call your friends and family. They all either worked for my mother or were clients of my mother, my sister, or my wife. And I'd call them, and they go, bro, I can't work with you, man. Your mom is my realtor. I'm like, no, I work for my mom. It's okay. You really can't. You can work with me. And they wouldn't. So my second month in real estate, I had 7 closings. And those all came from for sale by owners, listing and selling them another house, selling their house, or picking up a sign call off of that listing and selling that person a house. And
so I want to pick up on something, because you started, and it sounds like you were getting ready to get ready to get ready to get ready, and it required someone to confront you. It sounds like
sure.
Your dad,
sure.
And there was
a
shift that happened.
Yeah.
Can you dig a little bit more? Like, what do you remember about that moment? Because that seems like it was to go from that to 7 closings.
Yeah.
Like, that's
and
watershed.
It was horrible, dude. Like my first listing, when I was leaving the house, I backed over their mailbox and knocked it over. I had to bring my mom back with me because when I got back to the office, she said, how did you come up with this price? And I was like, well, that's what they said they wanted to list it for. And she said, did you do the CMA? I was like, well, yeah, I did the CMA, but I didn't even know how to read a CMA. So I just gave it to him and was like, here's your CMA. They don't ask me anything about it. Fortunately, they were very gracious. And when my mom came back, they agreed to price it within where it needed to be. And those same people, I sold them a house. This is all true. This could be like bad that I'm sharing this. The same people who I listed too high and ran over their mailbox, I thought my car was in drive and it was in reverse. I'm waving at them and just plow over it. I wrote up, they had 2 homes that we showed them, and they were both new constructions in different builders. And when I wrote up the contract, I wrote up the wrong address, and it got accepted. And then I had to go back and go, I made a mistake and put the wrong address on here. So that they let us out of that agreement, and we were able to write it.
Sounds like a little bit of a rocky start there at the first one.
It was brutal, man. It was brutal. So I tell people, listen, if I can be successful in this industry, you can be incredibly successful.
Well,
You've got a shot.
Here's the thing. I want agents to pick up on that because, like, so often I hear when I'm working with agents, even ones that have been in the business, that don't feel like they know everything. Yeah. They get stuck in that getting ready to get ready to get ready.
Well, I tell them all the time, don't go out there and make a mess, because you're not going to make a mistake that's so big that you're going to be out of the business, right? But if you're continuing to just go, I'm going to plan to be ready, and yet you don't ever take any action. That was me. I was adjusting my desk, making sure in my mind I had things. In my mind, I was trying to justify I was working to avoid doing what I was scared to do. And the reason I didn't take action right away was I was uncomfortable. I was out of my comfort zone. I didn't know what I should be doing. At my mom's brokerage, I love her. She's so talented and gifted, but there was no training program to go through. And so about my second week, my wife's like, look, you need to do something or either get out of the office because you're driving me nuts. And I got invited to this class. This guy was coming in to speak. His name was Roger Butcher. And I went to it, and my wife's like, don't buy a thing. And I came back, and I bought his $2,000 system, right? And it was like the Roger Butcher method. And in it, he had this audio CD, and I just destroyed that sucker. And it was that's an actual little disc. You put it in a player, and you press play, and music comes out.
I understand.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. My son was giving me a hard time. We played Pictionary the other day, and it's the classic game of quick draw, and it says on there updated for the 90s. And one of my pictures I drew for my wife, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be so easy, and it's all play. And I knew my boys were partnered together, and I was like, there's no way they're gonna get this. It was a Walkman.
I had one of those. Okay, this is not real estate related at all. And do you still think the 90s is 10 years ago? Because that was like 30,
we said that.
Like
we were
30
like,
years
the
ago.
90s was 10 years ago. No, it wasn't. My wife, we had that conversation the other day. But I had the CD, and it was him making live calls to for sale by owners. And for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, I know what to say. Because when my dad said work for sale by owners and cut out the ads from the newspaper and glue them to a postcard and put them in this index card and call them for 8 weeks every week, and then move them through your box and have dividers for each week. And that's what I did. But my first calls were like, hey, I'm Jonathan, and I'm in real estate. You're for sale by owner. Like, yeah, I probably can help you. Hello, are you still there? Hello. And they went horribly bad. We don't want to work with a realtor. Okay, thank you. Have a good day. And that was my first calls. Then when I'm listening to Roger speak, I still remember it to this day. I remember my script to a T. I took these big flip chart sticky pages, and I wrote out the top objections that I kept getting. I don't want to work with a realtor. We're not paying you a commission. What are some of the ones for sale by owners say? Do you have a buyer that's interested in my house? And then when I discovered it was a process, not an event, right? Meaning, the goal of the call wasn't to get a listing. The goal of the call was to get in their house. And the goal of getting in their house wasn't to get a listing. It was to get to the next conversation. And I knew that over a period of 8 weeks, statistics said 86% of for sale by owners listed with a realtor. So most people would give up, though, after the first or second attempt to get that. So I would call them and I would go, hi, I'm calling for the owner of the home for sale. And they would say, this is the owner. And I'd say, fantastic. My name's Jonathan Dupree. I'm in real estate. How are you doing today? And they would go, we don't want to work with a realtor. And I'd go, fantastic. I understand. There are a lot of realtors I don't want to work with either. Anyway, is your home still available? And they would tell me yes. And I would say, would you be offended? I use these scripts. I shared them a lot. Would you be offended if I could, would you? And in my experience, I've used these scripts forever. So I'd say,
yeah, you teach me these scripts.
Yeah. Well, I would say, would you be offended if I came by and took 10 or 15 minutes to preview your home? Most people are not going to go, yeah, I'd be highly offended. But they would give some. They wouldn't give me all these objections. They'd give me one or two of them. And they'd say something like, well, I don't know. Do you have a buyer? And I would say, well, I don't know. I haven't seen your home yet. I work with a lot of buyers in your area. I'm not sure if it'd be a fit. So again, would you be offended if I took 10 or 15 minutes to come by and preview? I would circle right back. I'd answer the objection, circle right back to the would you be offended if. Or they might say, we're not paying you a commission. Fantastic. I'm not asking you to pay me a commission. I'm just asking if you'd be offended if I came by and took 10 or 15 minutes to preview your home. We're not going to list with you. Great. I'm not asking you to list with me. I'm just asking if you'd be offended if I took 10 or 15 minutes to come by and preview your home. And the news flash was, for sell by owners, don't sit around in groups and have role plays on how to handle calls from realtors, right? They don't practice scripts on what to say to realtors to prevent them from coming. So I realized real quickly I could be the most prepared person in any conversation, then I increased my odds to win at a high level. So I worked as hard as I could on my scripts and my handling objections and overcoming objections and tie downs and embedded commands. And I realized that I could begin to influence people and move them in a direction that I want, not manipulate them, but move them in a direction that I wanted them to go, and look for the ones that ultimately raise their hands. And I put together this system, and that's how I had 7 closings my second month. But I got in the trenches even when I wasn't good, right? In the beginning, those scripts were on the wall because I needed them. They give me, I was nervous, I would do the prayer. You know the prayer? When I make my first calls and I go, please don't answer. Please don't answer.
Right. I wasn't familiar with that prayer.
Yeah. And then I go, answer machine. You guys know what those are? I get an answer machine. I go, oh, yes, thank you. God is good. I don't have to talk to this person. And I was scared, but then they'd answer, and I would go, hi, I'm calling for the, I was a little shaky, unsure of myself. Sounded like I was reading a script because I was. I had it right in front of me on a big flip chart. And then I got to where I took off the wall, and I had like a little book that clipped onto my desk, and it flipped with clear sheets I could put scripts in, and I had it color-coded my objections, so whenever they gave me an objection, I could just flip right to it. And then I didn't need them at all, but I still had them up there. But at the beginning, I was like, okay, they just gave me this objection. And I would scan my room to find the sheet that had the answer, and I would give back read my script to handle that objection. And it was horrible. But it worked. And I started getting listings, and people still worked with me. The people that I ran over their mailbox and wrote up the wrong house gave me referrals for years. We became great friends, laughed about it. So it's getting in the field and not worrying about making mistakes or not having all the answers. I didn't know stuff. People would ask me questions, and I would say, that's a great question. I'll make sure that I get you an answer on that. If I didn't know it, I didn't make something up. I just said, hey, I'll make sure that I get you the right answer. Fair enough? And they go, yeah, fair enough. And I'd write it down and make sure I answered it.
So yet again, what I'm hearing is that the most lethal mistake that anyone can make is not to take action.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's a real estate, another business endeavor, or something in life. That is the most lethal mistake that you can make.
That's right.
A lot of really valuable content there in your first couple of weeks and months on your mother's team in real estate. How did you use that momentum to take your next step in your career?
Yeah, so I didn't like showing someone 20 homes and they circle back to the first one and then it's gone because they didn't write it up when they should have. And I enjoyed real estate, but I was really passionate about training and coaching, right? I mean, I loved that. And I traveled as a professional speaker for years before getting into real estate. So I tried to figure out how to do that in the real estate world. And I started teaching in our local board for free. I just started teaching any company that would have me in to speak. I would come speak to their agents and teach and train on what I was doing. And one day I did a class at our board, and we probably had about 200 agents at it. And someone came up to me and said, hey, I'm with Keller Williams, and we're looking for a team leader. Can I put your name in the hat? And I said, I don't even know what a team leader is, but put my name in the hat. And the next day I received a phone call, and then I realized this was a real opportunity. I learned more about the role, and I said, man, this is what I want to do. I'm passionate about helping agents and teaching and training and consulting. And so I went to my mom and I said, hey, I have this opportunity. I know you have your own brokerage, and this would require me to be at Keller Williams. Do I have your blessing to explore this? And she said, absolutely. So I did, and 8 weeks later, I became the team leader in that market center, and I was so effective that my first 6 months we went from 153 agents to 135. I was awesome.
Now that is growth.
And I was learning this new role, and I had a great coach, Rich Rector, and he would share things with me and help me, and I was way out of my comfort zone. And but then we went from 135 agents to 200 agents, and then from 200 agents to 250 agents, and we just steadily grew and grew and grew, and provided a tremendous amount of value to the agents, but also to the market. I was always teaching classes at our board. I was doing similar things to what you guys are doing here with a podcast. I was doing a coaching call for any agent that wanted to come, and I didn't care what company. I didn't care if you ever joined ours. It was just here's information that can help you wherever you're at, and then I made a decision to step down out of that role and open my own brokerage. And my mother had, in that time, I was a team leader for four or 5 years, and in that time frame, my mother had shut her brokerage down and rolled it into KW. And I think just growing up in a family of real estate professionals, and my mom and dad had their own brokerage for 20 years. That was something my sister and I always strived to do. We were had this vision of having our own company. And so I stepped down, and we started our own brokerage. And in 3 years, we grew it to the largest independent real estate brokerage in the state of Louisiana. And grew it from 0 to 150 agents in a 3-year period. We didn't have an office when we launched. We didn't have anything. We just said we're starting our own brokerage, and grew it really quickly, and then rolled that brokerage into another company. And then a year and a half after that, I received a phone call to come out to Austin and meet with Jason Abrams and meet with Gary Keller, and that's an interesting story too, because when that happened, I wasn't looking for an opportunity, and they reached out, and I actually said no. I actually said I was in our courtyard at our house pacing on the phone, and I walked back in, and my son was reading the MREA, and he had been licensed for 6 months or something like that, and he said. Who is that? My wife was cooking. I walked in the kitchen, and I told my wife, I said, that was Keller Williams, and they want me to come to Austin and meet with Jason Abrams and Gary Keller. And my son was like, awesome, when are you going? I said, actually, I told him I don't think I'm going to go. He said, what? Are you crazy? Why would you say that? And I think sometimes we all have this kind of almost this ego, that comes into play, and it sabotages our opportunity. And for me, it was that kind of came into the picture. My son told me, call him back, and I did. I listened to him, and I said, I'm going to come. And a week later, I came out, and I spent about a month, one day a week, coming into Austin and meeting with Jason and meeting with Gary. And last day, Gary and I spent about 7 or 8 hours in a room just talking like we are right now. And we didn't talk about what company I was at. We didn't talk about Keller Williams. We talked about Jonathan Dupree. and what was important to me. And then a month later, I moved to Austin and started working for him as a consultant. And 8 months later, I moved to Phoenix and started working for him as the regional director for the Southwest region, which is funny because there is no regional director manual or handbook. And so I stepped into this role. And again, almost like when I was a realtor calling for sell by owners, I just started doing what I knew how to do. Like I just started calling you guys and going, let's go on appointments together. I just started leading. I just started doing what I knew to do. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And some of our listeners don't know. I mean, I'm the team leader here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and so you and I get the opportunity to work together, and I've been greatly helped, and so I appreciate that. I want to step back into the independent world. Sure. We have a lot of people who listen to this who either they do dream and aspire of starting an independent brokerage that's kind of seen as this like pinnacle, like if I can get there, and then others who listen who already own successful or maybe they're struggling. What did you learn as an independent that was growing fast, but tell us about some of those struggles?
Yeah, so the reason they call you a broker is because you're broker than your agents. I mean, that's the reality. You don't start a brokerage because you want to make a bunch of money. All right. We didn't launch with the intent to just have one brokerage. Our plan was to expand into other markets. It became very difficult and took so much money that we couldn't expand into other markets. We tried, and it was difficult without a tremendous amount of capital. So that was the first thing, and I learned that I learned that as an independent, I could only get so big, and I could only impact and influence so many people. And so for me, we had a strong value proposition. I mean, we taught at a high level. We consulted agents at a high level. We crushed other brokerages. We just crushed them. We had some of the biggest producers, but yet we couldn't make it work. I could have made it work if I were out selling, but that's what happens, right? I saw that with my mom for 20 years. My mom is this past year, she sold like $70 million in real estate. She's in her 70s. When she had her own company, she had to sell to be able to have the brokerage. So the money she's making selling is going into the brokerage. And when you're not selling, then you got to recruit. Like she only had 20 agents, but they stayed with her forever, and they're still with her. Some of those agents are still with her today, to this day. And so it's when you're not selling, I was no longer in production. I was building a brokerage. Then you got to recruit great agents, and then you realize I had to try to shift our model because we needed to figure out how to generate more income and revenue, and it was difficult and exhausting and tiring. And after 3 years, I realized I got about as big as I was going to get. Like that's come to an objective reality. You're not going to be able to expand without a ton of capital. And I was like, do I really want to do that? Do I really want to do that? Or do I want to be somewhere where I can utilize my strengths and my gifts and maximize my potential and stay in my lane, stay in my wheelhouse, work in those areas versus having to be the guy. I'm okay now. Used to not be okay with not being the guy. I'm okay now not being the guy and just working in my strengths and doing what I'm good at. Does that make sense?
That's a perfect distinction to make. You don't necessarily have to do what you think the next logical step is supposed to be. Yeah. You can determine what are my strengths, where are my passions, and where do I really want to fit into this puzzle.
Yeah.
And then take that job.
That's right.
And now you're more passionate about showing up to work every day and pouring into it.
100%.
It doesn't feel like a job. Now you're doing something you're passionate about.
Yeah, so I'm an employee right now. When I've been an employee? Never, except for the one time I was a team leader. The 2 times I was at Keller Williams. That's the only times in my life I've been an employee. I'm okay with it. I love it. I love doing what I do. I feel like I'm in my zone and I'm working in my strength and I'm in my lane. And it took a lot of I had a lot of success. I've also had a tremendous amount of failure in my life. And so it's, I think it's so funny. I have a friend of mine in Baton Rouge, and he has he restores Lamborghinis.
Not a bad gig.
That's what he does. And then he flips them. And he buys these Lamborghinis, he restores them, he flips them. So he's in one that he had just restored. He pulls up to Starbucks, and I'm with a friend of mine, and I was like, he goes, "Look at that car." I said, "Oh my God, that's my buddy. You want to see his car? He'll let you see it. He restored this." So we go there, and the guy gets out of the car, and we're talking, and the driver of the car gets out, and he looks at my friend after I introduce him, and he looks at me and says, "Man, this is the fastest success story in real estate." And I said, "Dude, where have you been for the last 20 years?" Because it's been such a journey, and I think I've learned more from my failures than I have from the successes that I've had.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for people in business and leadership to know is John Maxwell has a book called Failing Forward, and it's a great book, but it talks about how you never truly fail unless you just quit, and every failure is like a stepping stone to your next, and every failure I've had in my life I've seemed to somehow level up. But it's taken a lot to get to a point where I'm at today where ego can kind of go in my back pocket, and I can go, I just want to do what I do and focus on me and not worry about other people, what other people think or what other people say, or me having to feel like I'm the man. That doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah. I know Joe has another question here, of course. You've said ego a few times, and I heard it said once, and this is a cutesy, acronym, whatever. But I heard it said that oftentimes ego stands for edging growth out.
Okay, that's cool.
And if we're not careful, our ego sometimes causes us to keep our head down and not to see opportunity. And it sounds like at various points in your life, pushing the chips in and going all in has required you to come out of yourself, out of the ego, and to be able to see opportunity, whether it be with your son telling you to call someone back, or realizing that the capital demands of the independent brokerage were going to be something that wasn't the path you wanted to be on.
Yes. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
Oh, no.
I think when I think of that, ego plays a big role, and then what happens is if you're not careful, you get humbled really quickly. And that happened in my life, through the independent. My son saw what was happening in my world, right? And that's why he's like, you need to pick the phone back up, and not every day. People don't get calls that say, "Hey, Gary Keller wants you to fly out to Austin and meet with him."
Right.
and you need to take that. Don't make a foolish decision right now. And he saw where I was in my world, and we have blind spots, all of us. And when we have people in our world that we trust and they see that blind spot and they tell me, I'm going to listen, if I trust them, if I have this level of trust. And for me, I the independent brokerage for me, it cost me everything financially. Like I've never experienced anything like that in my life, and pretty much lost everything I had and started over from scratch and worked to rebuild. And all I did was put my head down and keep moving forward. And somehow I leveled up to the next level after coming out of this financial disaster that I navigated through. And so it's when you have kids, especially older kids, and you navigate through a financial situation and you lose everything you have, and you're in this space that you don't want to be in. You go, how did I wake up in this spot? How did I end up here? I was really talented and good. How did this happen? And you navigate through that with older kids. It's really hard because they know what's going on. And it just puts you at this place in life where I think for me, it could have gone either way. I could have been really angry and upset and just been in a bad spot. Or I could have just said, how can I just keep moving forward? And I know 6 months is going to come whether I want it to or not. A year is going to be here whether I want it to or not. I don't want to be in this same spot 6 months from now. And also, man, I had to just really rely on God, honestly. I have tried to create all these things myself, and I think I'm really good and talented at doing it. But obviously, I have failed. Obviously, I'm missing the mark somewhere, and I'll never forget. I told my wife, I said, I'm done trying. I'm giving up. I'm going to allow God to do whatever he wants to do in my world right now. And that's legit when 2 weeks later I received a phone call from Gary Keller. Now, how smart am I? I said, I'm not coming. So it's that's kind of been the journey and the path.
Well, unfortunately, you did ultimately accept that role as the regional director for the Southwest region. And I did a little research, Jonathan, and I'd love to read a part of the mission statement. It says here, to master our lives, our relationships, and our careers to such a degree that we can't help but to empower those around us. Yeah. Tell me a little bit. What does that mean to you? How does that actually play out?
Well, so the entire mission statement is my mission is to master my life, my relationships, and my career to such a degree that I can't help but to empower those around me and attract those who seek the same. So if every day what I'm doing is really working to become better today than I was yesterday, to become the best version of Jonathan Dupree. And if I just focus on being the best version of me and being who God has called me to be, and then as a side effect of that, I will naturally empower people around me. Constantly working to master the relationships that I'm working at becoming better. I used to be a person that would be intimidating to be around. It wasn't my intent. I'm a strong driver and result oriented, and I'm not really people person. I'm more task oriented, and I can be a people person. I can mask myself, and I can look like, hey man, this guy loves being around people. But if I had a choice of being around a bunch of people or just being by myself and working on something, I'll be by myself and work on something. And it makes it sound like I don't like people. That's not true. But it would come across that I didn't like people or that I was intimidating. And I'll never forget, I had a good friend of mine, Pat Guttery. He was kind of my right-hand man. And he came to me one day and said, hey, can I be honest with you? You can come across really intimidating, and I know you, and I know that's not your style, but other people don't know you, and that's how you would come across. And I became really open to that because I trusted him. And so I began at that point to study human behavior at a really high level and learn how to adapt and adjust how I interacted with people, and learn other people how to quickly identify where they were behaviorally so that I could mirror and communicate with them in a way where they felt like, man, this guy really, I don't know what it was, but I just connected with him. I try to do it with my own family. My wife would be, hey, you need to be more empathetic. You come across, my son would be sick, and I'm like, a scale of 1 to 10. 10 meaning get me to the hospital, 1 meaning I'm okay, where are you? My son would go, I'm a 7, but it's okay.
And then you'd be like, no, you're actually a 4.
and so I learned, man, I need to really work on this, and that became a big part of mastering the relationships, and really working to improve in that area, and my career, working at being the best I could be in my field. And if I'm doing that and then constantly looking for ways to empower others, meaning, back to I don't have to be the man. When I can have someone else share or speak or share a strategy or feel like they're collaborating, that my ideas aren't the only ideas in the room, that other people can contribute to this conversation at the same level that I can, and giving them a platform, and to feel like, when we're doing a leadership call, and I'm asking our leaders to share ideas or strategies, that they feel open and like, you know what, I'm not. A lot of times when you have leadership call in any type of organization, people are scared to say something because they're scared that their idea might they might say this is a dumb idea or a stupid idea, or they're going to say something about it. So they just don't talk at all. And empowering people is letting them feel like they contribute just as much to the organization as I do, and that we're a team working together, and we all have our own roles, and they're all important, and everything we do is important. And so when I want to empower someone, it's empowering them to feel like they can contribute and collaborate. It's empowering them by sometimes, you have to have people. I had a coach who really believed in me, that I could play at the college level when I probably didn't believe I could. But by borrowing his belief and him speaking into me, I was able to play at that level, and he pushed me to be the best player I could be. I wasn't a really talented guy. I just outworked everybody. And so when you're looking at empowering others from a leadership perspective, it's pouring into them and believing in them, even when they don't believe in themselves, and helping them see who they could be, who their future self could look like. And it's really just empowering them to step into their greatness and live up to their full potential, and helping them raise the standards in their own life. Because they can, right? They just haven't, because maybe someone hadn't been pouring into them or encouraging them or challenging them and supporting them. And to me, that's empowering others to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And then if you're doing that at a really high level, guess what happens? You naturally attract people who are seeking the same thing. Right? You're naturally attracting people who want to be the best version of themselves that they can be.
It's fantastic. And all three of us in this conversation, we work day in and day out in that world. So along that line, as you're working with agents to see that greatness in themselves, what are some of the things right now that you're specifically seeing agents struggle with, where maybe they're not seeing the opportunity, or they're not taking advantage of what they have? Like, is there specific areas in the real estate business right now where you see people tripping up?
Well, I don't think it's any different right now than in normal time. Although we're in a crisis, and it's really challenging to do business right now. People are still doing business, right? You still have top producers producing at a high level. You also still have people who don't work, and now they use this as an excuse of why they're not experiencing success. But before this, they weren't experiencing success. So what was the excuse then, right? What was the challenge then? The reality in the real estate world is most people just don't work. That's not it's not a knock to anyone listening who doesn't want to work. If you have a real estate license and you don't want to work, that's okay. But if you're going, I want to be successful, but your activities don't line up with the results you desire, and you don't increase the activities, then you really don't want the results. You just desire results to some kind of way magically appear. And so what I see agents struggle in all the time is that they try to become busy to justify to themselves that they're doing something. But the reality is they're not being productive. And they're not doing the necessary activities, which is lead generate, to get appointments, to get listings, to get buyers, to have closings, to make money so that you can go then take that money. Money's not a bad thing. I used to think it was spiritual to be poor. Like there was some kind of award you got for living life and being able to navigate through having no money doing it. And then I read a book by Bob Proctor called You Were Born Rich, and another book by Catherine Ponder, the Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. And those two books really transformed how I thought about money. And then I realized money just flows, right? It's a good thing. It just makes you more of who you are. If you're a good person with money, you're going to go do great things. If you're a good person without money, you're going to think about how you wish you had money so you could go do great things. and you continue to sabotage your success. If you're a bad person with money, you just go do things that that a bad person would do with money. And if you're a bad person without money, you're still going to do bad things. It just won't be as magnified. Money just magnifies who you already are. And so I had that shift, and then the times I've had a lot of money and times I've gone through and lost money, it's this mindset, right? I wasn't poor. I've been broke. There's a difference, right? Like poor is a mindset. Broke is a condition, and you can change a condition. But the way you change it is by changing the activities, changing the environment, changing the thought process, changing. There's some kind of change that has to happen for you to get out of whatever circumstance you're in or situation. So when I see agents, they're not willing to make the changes. They think that their lack of activity will somehow generate massive results. And then they go, well, real estate didn't work for me. No, you didn't work your real estate business. That's what really happened, right? I always tell people you got to have a plan, and then you have to work that plan. And a lot of times people don't want to work that plan. Real estate's a lot of networking. You're building these relationships, and I would tell people it's called net working, right? Not net sitting. It's because you got to work. You got to go build relationships. You've got to lead generate. And if you're in real estate and you go, I don't want to lead generate, I don't want to talk to people, then you're in the wrong business, right? It's not sitting behind a computer and all of a sudden you make an ad on Facebook and all these leads come in, and now you're making $200,000 a year selling real estate. That's the biggest challenge I see is agents' activities don't line up with the results that they desire. And they're not willing to make a change.
One of the things I found working with agents is a lot of times the primary reason why they're not taking that action and not moving their business forward is because of fear. Yeah. And whether they're willing and able to kind of acknowledge that or not is irrelevant, but that fear sometimes can kind of stop us in our tracks. And so I love what you're saying about, number one, as leaders, we can help instill confidence in people even when they don't have it. And number two, as individuals, as agents and business owners, it's also our responsibility to not wait for somebody to come give us a nudge and to make the conscious decision to enact change by filling your head with valuable content from podcasts, from other leaders, from reading books, right? From studying other business owners and getting into that action, getting over the fear and just moving forward, whether it's comfortable or not.
Yeah, well, I've always told people fear could stand for two things. It could stand for forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And in my life, I've had moments where I've wanted to just forget everything and run. But I've had to make choices, and our choices make us who we are, right? And I've had to go, this is a difficult situation I'm in, and I just have to face it and rise up and navigate through it. And whether it's major issues or whether it's, I'm scared to pick up the phone and call these for sale by owners and I'm hoping they don't answer, I'm calling anyway. And if they answer, I'm going to face it. I'm going to rise and I'm going to go navigate through it. And I've got my scripts up here and I'm going to sound bad doing it because I'm scared. They're going to hear it in my voice. And that's okay though, because they haven't practiced their scripts on what to say back to me. And so it's having that mindset of moving forward, even when everything's not perfect, even when you haven't learned. Every office has the agent in there that tells everyone else how they should do their business, and that agent has done no business. Like, oh, you don't want to write your contract that way. And you go, well, how many contracts have you written? Well, none, but I've been to all the classes, and that ain't the way you want to do it. It's
we all know it's true.
Yeah. And so it's man, I would tell you, don't be afraid to make a mistake. I've made tons of mistakes, and I don't know. I think the ability to continue to move forward and keep working on improving and focusing on doing the activity, even when you're not good at it, even when you're unsure, even when you don't have a lot of confidence, you do it and you do it every day and you work on becoming better. You work on your skill sets. You role play with people. You practice, and you practice just like you play in the game. In a game, you're going full speed. In practice, if you go half speed, that's what causes most injuries. You got to go full speed. And so when you're role playing and practicing, you got to do it, treat it like it's real. And work on improving. Work on being a better version of you today than you were yesterday.
Yeah, that's super good. I want to transition us into the last segment of our show. These are the same 3 questions that we ask every single guest. We call it 3, 2, 1 action. And so here we go. We're going to just rapid fire them at you. Okay. And the first one being, what is the most influential business book that you've ever read, or maybe you're currently reading and it's having a profound impact?
Oh, man. If I just had to pick one, I would say James Allen, As a Man Thinketh. It's a small little book, and it's this dude wrote this book in the early 1900s, and he was a pastor. And the book, though, is all about how to think and how our thoughts are real, and our mind is like a garden. And if you're not careful, and I hate gardening, because like when you do a flower bed and you do something like where you put a lot of work in it, and then weeds start coming, and you constantly have to weed the garden, and if you don't, then it's like just it gets bad. And that's how our mind is. If we're not careful and we're hanging out with negative people, Charlie Tremendous Jones said, who you'll be in the next 5 years will be a direct result of the books that you've read and the people you surround yourself with. And if we're surrounding ourselves with people who are telling us what we can't do, the market's bad, and you're surrounding yourself with those people who are negative, all of a sudden that's creeping in, and you're letting them rent space in your head. And now these weeds or negative thoughts or limited beliefs are growing, and you're allowing them to take root. And when you let weeds take over the flower bed, the flowers can't grow. The weeds smother them out and take over. And that's what happens in our mind. And this book's all about how to guard your thoughts, and how thoughts are very real and they shape our future. And so that's probably been the most influential book that I've ever read. I reread it every year. I would say that book.
That's a perfect analogy and a perfect segue into question number 2,
okay,
which is, who is the most influential person, whether you've met them or not, that's made an impact on your career?
Oh, I would say Gary Keller, without a doubt. When I was first at Keller Williams, I never met him. I had this perception of who he was. I've seen him from the platform, and I was like, this is a brutal guy who just leaves roadkill and
roadkill Gary.
Yeah, and then when I met him, my wife sent me a text, and she said, "How's it going?" And in one of our breaks, I texted her back and said, "Well, Gary just hugged me." And working with him, what I've seen is just how much he cares about people and what he does for people and how he leads. And so everything I've done as a regional director has come from modeling what I have seen him do as 8 months when I worked for him as a consultant, and being able to spend time with him on a consistent basis. I would say, and that's a big thing for me to say, because I've only been in a relationship, or this type of mentor relationship, for a year or so. In that time frame, he's impacted me more than any other business mentor I've ever had.
Well, let me just say this, Jonathan, you're not the first person to say Gary, but let me make it certain to our viewers and to our listeners that we're not prompting you with these answers. These are real life answers.
Y'all didn't send me anything. That's the truth. I would say my dad, he's influenced me a lot and impacted me a lot. My mother, but if you were saying business wise, he's challenged me to think bigger than I've ever thought, and has in a year really helped me collapse time frames and moving from where I am to where I want to be not because of something he's given me, because he's made me think different, and he's made me act different and behave different. And he's definitely been the most influential business leader that I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I love that. As David said, this is called 3, 2, 1 action. And the reason why we call it that is because we're big believers on this podcast in taking the next step, taking immediate massive action right away. So my last question for you today, Jonathan, is what action do you suggest our listeners take today? What can they go do to move the needle in their business?
Well, so I always tell people the speed of growth always happens based on the speed of implementation. So you have different listeners that are all in different places in their life and in their career. So I think it would be asking yourself the question, what is the one thing I could do right now that would help me move closer to where I want to be, and then do that one thing, right? And it may be one thing you heard in this episode or a different episode. I think you can always take one thing and apply it quickly right away, instead of just thinking about it and thinking about doing it, and then you look up next week and you're still in the same spot. What could you do today that's going to help you move closer to where you want to be now? Right? It doesn't have to take 5 years. It doesn't have to take, I think when I rolled my brokerage into another company, and when I tell you, I literally went through losing everything, I really went through losing everything. And I'm not embarrassed to talk about it. I walk with a limp from that, but that's a good thing, because I have a story to tell and share of perseverance and how you can come through difficult situations in your life. And on the other side is something even more successful that you never could have dreamed of. I never could have dreamed a year ago that, number one, I'd be back at Keller Williams. And I know this isn't a Keller Williams podcast. That's where I'm at in my life. And number two, that I would be working directly for Gary Keller. Those things never would have crossed my mind. And where I'm at right now, I think, is a result of just continuing to move forward and every day asking myself, what can I do today to be a little bit better? I was writing courses. I was writing script books and selling them. I was doing all kind of things, creating. I was constantly creating content. And I didn't put out these, I'm looking for opportunity kind of things. That just came. But it came as a result of me continuing to contribute and give back and teach and train and help other people. Even when I was going through the most difficult time in my life, I was creating courses. I wrote a script book. I've written multiple courses and in that time frame. So it's how can you be better today than you were yesterday? I think that's the one thing you go, and each person listening is going to have a different thing that they could say, well, if I did this, I'd be a little bit better today. If you're an agent and you're focusing on growing your real estate business, hands down, if you don't have enough leads coming in to meet or exceed your goals, you have a lead generation problem. So it's, what do you have to do right now to increase your lead flow? What can you do to increase the amount of leads coming into your business and decrease the cost of those leads and increase your conversion ratio? If you're a successful agent, the thing is, how can I be even better? What does the next level look like for me? And that always comes down to personal growth. Everything rises and falls on leadership. So if you want to step up to the next level, it's how do I work harder on myself now than I do on my business? And if I work harder on myself, my business will naturally grow. So each person would have a different thing. I don't think there's one thing I could say that this is what you need to do. Does that make sense?
Definitely makes sense. Well, Jonathan, this has been a great conversation, and I appreciate you coming to talk with us and giving this value to our listeners. And being really transparent. That goes such a long way. I know I've picked up some things just in this conversation and grown, and that's a goal, right? All of us around this table desire to grow, desire to bring people into our world that want to grow and desire to move fast. And so for our listeners out there, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Join us next week as we interview another top real estate entrepreneur around the world. Smash that subscribe button, leave us a review on iTunes or your platform of choice, and we'll see you here next week for another episode of All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.